everyone. Thank you for reaching out, finding this room in this early training morning. So I'm going to give a talk today about imagining an urban native blockchain. This is actually a slight modification of a talk I gave about 9 months ago at Urban Assembly in Lisbon, when this was sort of just an idea. Since then, it has actually evolved to, it is actually a project that's in development. The development is being led by the well-organized team working on it. Basically, most of it is being funded by the Urban Foundation. So it's actually it's starting to happen. So this is really exciting. So I wanted to give this talk here today because that's an example of one of the reasons I particularly was very interested in this Urbitchain idea was it's an opportunity to explore different mechanism designs for how blockchain incentive designs can be done. And because Urban is designed very differently than most blockchain systems today, which we'll go into. So very quickly, I'll quickly explain Urbit to anyone who's not familiar with it. So I think I've come up with the best explanation of Urbit that anyone, because I think most Urbit people are actually very bad at explaining it. So here's all you have to think about. Okay, so we'll start off with this idea of there's a project once upon a time called Secure Scuttlebutt. Secure Scuttlebutt is a decentralized social network. It was a way, it's a peer-to-peer gossip-based decentralized social network where instead of everyone pushing everything over a blockchain, just not scalable, what you do is if you like a post, you like a post, you gossip it to your peers. Those peers, when they communicate with someone else, they gossip it to their peers. And everyone's building this hash chain of all the messages that they've seen. And you get eventual consistency. You don't get fast consistency like you do on a blockchain. Rather, as messages get gossiped to the network more and more, as more communication happens, you eventually realize, okay, here's the whole gang of all communication on the network. Now, what you'll notice is this does not solve the double spend problem, right? But it's a social network. What are you going to double spend? Tell one person you like the post and tell a different person you dislike the post. It's okay, fine. That's okay. What you do in that case, if you see someone quote unquote double spend, you just, decrease your reputation of them, you unpeer from them. And so, you don't need to solve the double spend problem. This works very well for a social network. It's much more scalable than a blockchain. So that's Secure Scuttlebutt. Put that on the side. We come back. Okay, what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin was this idea, hey, let's build this decentralized money. And we have to invent this new decentralized data structure called a blockchain to make this possible. Ethereum comes along and says, hey, that's a cool decentralized data structure you got there. Well, what if you do a generalized VM on top of it? What if instead of just one app specific chain, it's hey, you can put this VM and you run any application on top of this blockchain data structure. I think the best way to think about Urbit is Urbit looks at Secure Scuttlebutt and says, hey, this is a very cool decentralized data structure you have. What if you put generalized VMs on top of it? Where instead of being for one app-specific social network, it rather builds a quote-unquote OS that people can build other decentralized social networks or messaging protocols or anything you might want to do on a Secure Scuttlebutt a hashtag style data structure. For Cosmos people, one way you can think about it is imagine everyone had their own little personal Cosmos chain, and then you use IDC to send messages back and forth with each other, and then you can deploy a social network by a contract that everyone deploys on their own chains. You might have heard of something very similar. It might sound very similar to Abstract OS by the Abstract guys. That's because they're basically trying to recreate Urbit on using their Osmosis in the United States. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, that's what Urbit is. How does Urbit relate to blockchain? So historically, Urbit was very, very anti-blockchain. Just legacy history of the project. They like very explicitly refuse to, they have this identity system that they need on the blockchain, but like, or that they need to maintain, and they used to maintain it on like a GitHub file, and they like, after insisting on like, hey, you should put this on a blockchain for like years, they were like very against it. But until finally, some of the old guard of Urbit kind of flushed out, and some of the new guard is much more open to blockchains. They've actually moved their ID system that used to be maintained on GitHub files. They've moved it onto Ethereum mainnet, kind of. But tokens are in the future. We can make Urbit even more well integrated with the blockchains. And so, why? One is, Azimuth, right? Azimuth is the name of Urbitchain ID system and Ethereum. So, you can make Azimuth this like who owns which Urbit ID. You can, you need Urbit need the blockchain for that. This whole, in the old world of Urbit, they were like, oh, these Urbit IDs should be treated as real estate, right? Like these transfers of Urbit IDs should be so uncommon. We don't need a fast finality system for this. That ended up not being true. People want to trade the Urbit ID, and so you need your coins on the blockchain to get that fast finality. You can create things like decentralized ships. Basically, while you ships are the term that Urbit uses for like the ones like little chain. But there are cases where sometimes you want an Urbit an Urbit VM that is decentralized, if you're using it for not just peer-to-peer messaging, but if you're using it for something that needs decentralized state, application to want shared state. So an example of that would be like, hey, on Urbit, let's say I want to like spin up a poker game amongst like 5 of us, right? The thing with Urbit is there's no reason that you should be putting that on a blockchain. There's no reason to put an entire a poker game amongst 5 people on a blockchain on a global blockchain. But with Urbit ships, you can create like, hey, we'll spin up a mini blockchain of almost 5 of us to hold the shared state of our poker game, and then once the poker game is settled, we close that blockchain down. And to interact with the digital economy, right? Urbit still is sort of operating in a very silo from the rest of like the crypto ecosystem, right? From an Urbit ship, you can't like natively make a Bitcoin transaction. People have built these like hacky translation layers, and we can make like blockchain transactions. But if Urbit itself existed on a blockchain, you can actually have more native interactions there. So why does Urbit need its own blockchain? So one is in Urbit, it's like because the current ID system is built on Ethereum, it kind of like defeats the whole point of part of the goal of Urbit is to build this like native identity system. And if you go onto like the guide of how to like get started with Urbit, the first step is to get an Ethereum address. So it's almost like defeats the point of like the Urbit IDs, right? It's like, okay, the Urbit ID should be the base identity system of this of an Urbit native blockchain. Urbit also has its own VM that they use. It's called VM. It's a functional VM, and it's very good for CTA proving. And so, if you had an Urbit native blockchain, you can actually build the NOF VM as the base VM of the system. You get more cultural sovereignty, and you can capture some of your own value. Today, when your Urbit has a lot of like Urbit is one of the projects in the ecosystem that has very deep culture and stuff. And but the problem is by building its network of culture on other blockchains, they're leaking that value that they could capture internally. What makes the designing an Urbit native blockchain is challenging because there's no Urbit token. Most blockchains today are very token centric. So on your security system, you usually need if you're doing a proof of stake, you need some token that people are staking, or you need token incentives or fees, right? You usually do DDoS prevention via a gas token system where you say, hey, per transaction, you have to pay, 0.02 ETH or whatever, right? But if Urbit doesn't have a token, how do we solve this? So In Urbit, instead of fungible tokens, we have NFTs. Um, every Urbit identity is also an NFT. And one thing that makes Urbit sort of unique from most blockchain systems is that identity system is what has scarcity on it. On something like Ethereum, you can create, as many Ethereum addresses as you'd like. There's no scarcity to that. Urbit actually designed it such that there is scarcity built into the identity system. So they have these three sort of layers of roles in the network called galaxies, stars, and planets. And they kind of have this hierarchical system where there's initially 256 galaxies. That is like the top layer of the network. Each galaxy then has 256 stars that are under it. So a galaxy could be called Rip, right? Under that, there are 256 stars, which are owned by the galaxy, and they have the right to mint those stars and give them away, and sell them or give them away or whatever. And then each star under it has this number squared, so that's about 4 billion. No one actually remembers the number. That many planets under it. So there is basically about 4 billion IDs, NFTs in the system. So what you could do is you could say, hey, NFTs are functionally fungible, right? Like even like cash in your pocket, even though it's an NFT, right? It has a serial number. For all intents and purposes, you do treat it as fungible for certain use cases, right? And in the same way, twins, they kind of all look the same. You can treat, we don't have to think too much about the fact that these are actually NFTs, because for the purpose of like proof of stake or fees or whatever, we can treat all planets as the same. We can treat all stars as the same. We can treat all galaxies as the same. But the problem still remains that you have this like 3-tier system where galaxies are not fungible from the stars if they're not fungible from planets. But today, these things trade for like millions of dollars. These things trade for like less than $1. These things trade for like, a few $100, right? And because they have very different properties in the network. So in the Urbit network. So how do we bring the different properties of the Urbit network and build like the proper structure on the blockchain? So one thing that people might not know is in the early versions of Urbit, these things were actually called stars, jukes, and earls rather than stars, galaxies. And Urbit takes a lot of inspiration from like feudal setups, and so in the blockchain design, I'm going to lean on that for some inspiration here. So one of the things in this Twitter account that I really like, they talk a lot about medieval history, and there's this one really good thread about how medieval Catholic society basically like set up a social structure that like kept the system in order. So we'll look after that picture. So we start with planets. Planets are sort of like this peasantry of the system, right? They are your base identity layer. They are used for simple resistance, and you need to have a planet to make your advantage on Urbit L1. So owning a planet doesn't do much other than just give you access rights to use the blockchain. From there, you have galaxies. Galaxies are, sort of like nobility. They're ultimately the owners of the system. Their job is to govern. They have the governance rights of the system. They provide the base infrastructure for the system. So there will be on Urbitchain, there's 256 validator slots, each of which are run by one galaxy. And most importantly, they have the rights to collect value from MEV revenues, not from transaction fees. We'll talk about in a second why there are no transaction fees in the system, but their primary value from MEV revenue, basically using the block SDK and block auctions to capture MEV rights from the system. So, I think those two are very simple, right? You got the planets and you got the galaxies. And I think, you need this to make a network. You need this is your account, base accounts. You need this to, use the network. These are the validators. The tricky thing in the Urbit ecosystem has always been, what do you do with stars? Stars are this like awkward middle child of the system where, people haven't really been able to figure out how to provide value to this thing that is like more valuable than a planet, less valuable than a galaxy. So in medieval society, basically, what happened was they basically built a system where like they gave the knights were basically used to be these like marauders or just like pillaging the land. And instead they like structured the society system like, oh no, okay, we're actually instead of like pillaging the land, we're actually gonna bake you into the social hierarchy and system and give you this like specific duties where okay, you get instead of like attacking the peasantry, you get these benefits, but in exchange you have to spend your time attacking our enemies. And so, all of this, come to terms with the existence of a warrior aristocracy, and you have to give like legitimacy to these like warrior nobles and like define their place and purpose in relationship to service and like religion. So, how they did this was they gave them land. So, I'm going to draw inspiration from EOS, which is one we don't hear too much about anymore, but they actually had a lot of really good ideas. So you go read the white paper, they have a lot of stuff about like name permission levels, basically like almost like what osmosis smart accounts are and counter abstraction is today. You have stuff about like transaction parallelization. But what we're going to focus on here today is their token model and resource usage system, particularly this section here. I'll read it out loud. Block producers publish their available capacity for bandwidth, computation, and staking. The EOS software allows each account to consume a percentage of the available capacity proportional to the amount of tokens in a 3-day staking contract. For example, if a blockchain based on EOS software is launched, if an account holds 1% of the total tokens, then that account has the potential to utilize 1% of a state's storage capacity. I think this is really interesting. Other than EOS, with this where if you own 1% of the EOS token, you get unrestricted access to 1% of blockchain storage capacity, right? And that means you can use it for yourself, or what actually commonly happens is developers buy it and then let their users use it for free and figure out some other restraining models for the users. You can use such like good technique or cat service or whatever to like limit their users. But at the blockchain level, the app developers will have unrestricted rights to that 1% of block space. Or if you're a landowner, if you're not using the land, you can rent it out. Similarly, in this model block, if you own a portion of the block space and have access to those blockchain resources, if you're not using it, you can rent them out. So this is very different than the gas model of blockchains, right? Which is used by Bitcoin, Ethereum, and anything else, because in Bitcoin and Ethereum and the gas token model, there's actually not a very strong linkage between the value of the token and the demand for the block space, right? Like gas prices are only non-negligible if blocks are full, and this leads to perverse incentives, right? Because now you want to make your blocks smaller and make it more expensive for your users to use it. And there's no really easy way to hedge the gas price spikes. It takes a very radical market approach to block space, which is like all block space is public property and constantly up for auction, which is, a take that you can take on, how property work, how property rights work. But in practice, you've never actually seen this model be successful in the real world. What usually happens in the real world is private property, right? And this idea, it's something that's very ingrained in the urban culture, urban philosophy, property rights. And so this idea is, hey, can we apply this, build the urban blockchain, build off of this property rights, private property basis of resource ownership rather than a radical market, everything off the auction one. So for every star you own, you get unrestricted access to 165,000 of the Urbitchain's block space. And the stars owners can do with their block space as they see fit. They can let users of their urban apps use it for free. They can do pass-through ownership of planets. So as I mentioned, like if you have a star, there you have 65,000 planets that you can give away, and but there's still, you can. They're all tapped. You know that hey, which of the planets that you gave away, you can make it so you say, hey, all these planets are allowed to use my star space for free, making your planets more valuable. The planet that you issued more valuable than other stars' planets. You can charge rent fees. You can say, hey, just pay me in Bitcoin or ETH or USD or whatever you want, and you can use my star space free, or you can tokenize the block space rights and resell them. So there's a protocol that we built on Osmosis called Fractal.fun, which is basically a way of tokenizing specific properties of NFTs. That you read and read not actually used to tokenize block space rights and resell them. So, so what's interesting about this model is it gives us a very new, different way of, solving this. What's the role of these three people in the ecosystem, right? The galaxies, process transactions for the planets that are trying to use the system. The planets put a rent into the stars, who then drive the stars, drive the users for the system. The galaxies provide the infrastructure. Stars provide the block space access, and the users, MEV, are kind of for the galaxies. So this is like how the Urbit blockchain, incentive design is structured. So this is being built today by Vulcanize, with funding by the Urbit Foundation. And it's just really exciting because I feel like we haven't seen new innovation in blockchain, core blockchain ecosystem infrastructure, in a long time. Everything is just sort of settled on this classical proof of stake system that we see in almost every blockchain today, which is cool. But I think, it's very interesting to see what planning on evolved for this project as a way to say, hey, let's step back entirely, try to see from first principles, if you had to redesign how block space allocations would work, how would you be reading that? And I'm hoping that we start to see more of that in the ecosystem where okay, you have to step back from first principles, how would you redesign proof of stake entirely? So yeah, thank you.